Hi everybody, this is Dr. Childs, and in this video you're going to learn a little bit more about rhetoric. The word rhetoric is probably one that's familiar to you in the phrase a rhetorical question. You guys have probably heard it used there, and today we are going to talk a little bit more about what the word rhetoric means in the field of writing, analysis, and argumentation. Now, first let's break down the definition, and this comes straight out of your textbook. Rhetoric means the ways in which words and images are used to engage and sometimes to persuade others. So basically, rhetoric means how words and images are used to get the audience to pay attention to the text and also to convince an audience of something. So rhetoric is basically a set of strategies for capturing the attention of and persuading an audience. These are some key terms for this unit that you will need to know. The rhetorical situation, and breaking that down a little bit more, audience, text, and message. Those are elements of the rhetorical situation. And the rhetorical appeals, ethos, logos, and pathos. And let me expand on both of these a little bit more. First of all, a text is part of the rhetorical situation. And when we use the word text in the field of rhetoric, we mean anything that can be read and analyzed. So text just doesn't mean something that is printed in words. It doesn't just mean a textbook. It doesn't just mean a passage from a book. It means anything that can be read and analyzed. And we use that word read loosely, meaning that we're not just reading words, but we can also read and analyze images, sounds. For example, an episode of a TV show is is a text. A student essay, a song, your Facebook profile, anything can be considered a text. The term is used very broadly. So a text is anything that can be read and analyzed. A text is part of the rhetorical situation. Now, the rhetorical situation, strictly speaking, is the relationship between text, audience, and author or creator. So you have a person or group of people who creates a text, and then an audience that views or hears the text or reads the text. And the job of the author or the creator is to figure out what the audience wants to see in the text, right? How to engage the audience or convince the audience. Now, when you, on the other hand, are analyzing a text that has already been created, these are the kind of questions that you want to ask. Who is the author or creator of the text? Why is he or she writing or creating it? Who is she trying to affect or persuade? Or in other words, who is the audience? What is he or she trying to persuade the audience of? Or what's the message of the text? What is the text trying to convince the audience to think? How will he or she persuade that audience? Meaning, what strategies will the text use to communicate its message? What type of text will be used? And how will that text be presented to the audience? In other words, how will the audience see a text? For example, in your group project for Units 3 and 4, you are creating an ad in your groups. And one of the things that you have to decide is where that ad would be seen. Is it going to be a television commercial? Or will it be a banner for a website? Or would it be a print ad? So you have to make that kind of decision. You could create the greatest ad in the world, but if you don't know whether it's going to be a billboard or a magazine ad, then your text will probably not be that effective. So to recap, the rhetorical situation is the set of relationships between audience, text, and author or creator. And we'll analyze the rhetorical situation here in a minute. And so you'll get a little bit of practice actually applying this to a text. Now, the rhetorical appeals are the strategies used in texts to appeal to or engage the audience. So these are the ways that a text convinces an audience. The first one is ethos, which means you are appealing to the persona or credibility of the speaker or writer. When a text has a good ethos, it is establishing the writer or creator's credibility. For instance, if you look at an ad for the car company Honda, Honda is generally considered to be a fairly reliable and high quality car company. And so Honda commercials, they win a lot of awards, they last a long time, they have a good resale value, so the brand already has a certain credibility. Now, logos is the appeal to reason using evidence, examples, and explanation. And so for the example that I mentioned before about the Honda car company, in a commercial for Honda, if the car company wanted to appeal to logos, they wouldn't just be able to rely upon their own credibility. They would have to give reasons or evidence why the car in their advertisement was high quality, like what kind of gas mileage does it get, what kind of awards did it win, how did it do on safety tests, things like that. Now, pathos is an appeal to the emotions of the reader, meaning that you go for the heartstrings in order to engage the reader or convince them to do something. The best example that I can think of pathos are those commercials on TV for the Humane Society. The Sarah McLachlan ones with the song Angel playing in the background where you see the sad pictures of dogs and cats. Now, that really pulls at your heartstrings, especially if you're an animal lover. But that's also a great example of how pathos can be a double-edged sword, and you have to be cautious when you're when you're going for the emotions, because what is your reaction when you see those sad dogs and cats on the Humane Society? Do you pick up the phone and donate money to the Humane Society, or do you reach for the remote control and change the channel? So you have to be careful before you try to start weaving emotions into your paper, because you can't really be sure exactly how it's going to work. Now, let's look at a couple of ads and talk about their rhetorical situation. Now, this ad right here is an old print ad for cigarettes, obviously. You can tell that it's very old because in the picture you have a doctor and the text says 20,679 physicians say Lucky's are less irritating. It's toasted, your throat protection against irritation, against cough. So basically what this ad is claiming, the message of this ad, is that smoking Lucky cigarettes will lead to less cough and less throat irritation. Now, from the vantage point of the 21st century, we know this is ridiculous. But how is the ad convincing to its audience of people before the 1950s? This ad is probably from the 1950s, before it really became public knowledge that cigarettes were dangerous. So let's talk about the different appeals. How does this ad appeal to the credibility of the company? Well, you have a doctor, right? You have a doctor right there on the front holding a pack of the cigarettes. He's looking at them lovingly, he's smiling, so it looks credible. If a doctor thinks they're good, then they're probably good. You also have this detail that says physicians say that Lucky's are less irritating. So we can totally rely on physicians, right? That's credible. It's trustworthy. Now, how does it appeal to logos? Well, on the one hand, it gives you a reason. You should buy Lucky's because they're less irritating. They're less irritating because they're toasted. Now, is this good logos? Is this good reason? No. But was it convincing to its audience? Yes. So it really matters, the success of this ad really matters on whether it's being looked at by a 21st century audience or a 1950s audience. So you do have to realize that audience is very important. How about emotion? How does it appeal to the emotion of the reader, of the viewer? Well, first of all, the doctor looks very happy, right? He's smiling at the Lucky's, so you kind of relate and think, oh, well, the doctor's very kindly looking, he's happy, so it creates this happy feeling regarding the cigarettes. Also, And I don't think I even noticed this myself until a student pointed it out once, but look how big the cigarette package is compared to his head. Now, an actual cigarette package would be much smaller than that when you're holding it up to someone's face. But the way this ad has positioned the cigarette package, it's big, it's right there smack in the middle, and so you really can't avoid it. It appeals to your emotions, your feelings, and desires that way by foregrounding the cigarettes and making them look larger than life. And so this is an ad that does appeal to the emotions, the reason, and the credibility. And so this ad uses ethos, logos, and pathos. Now, we look to a later cigarette ad. I'm thinking this one is from the 1980s, maybe 90s. And I couldn't find a date for this one. But what's interesting about this one, the doctor is gone, right? Think about why that is. Why would a late 20th century audience not be convinced by a doctor? Why would we not be convinced by being told that 20,000 doctors say that this is a good cigarette? Well, the obvious reason is that everybody already knows that cigarettes are deadly. You really can't convince people anymore that they're healthy. So advertising executives had to figure out a way to make cigarettes appealing through advertising without making these nonsensical, unfounded claims for health. Now, how does this ad appeal to credibility? You might think, well, how could it appeal to credibility? It doesn't have a doctor on there. It doesn't have any proof that Camel is better than any other brand. So how does this work? I would say that this ad appeals to the credibility of the brand by connecting this kind of loner, sort of badass looking guy on his motorcycle out in the wilderness, leaning back, smoking. This guy is supposed to be pretty cool. And so the credibility of Camel is not connected to the idea of it being healthful. It's connected to the idea of it being cool. Like, here's a cool guy. Camel is credible, not because it's healthy, but because it's cool. So see, credibility doesn't just mean literally trustworthy. It means that it can be trusted to deliver a certain image or a certain feeling or a certain something. That certain something. And that certain something for Camel in this ad is coolness, right? Now, what about, now pathos is the easy one. The text here tells you that Camel is where a man belongs. So it appeals to this sense of masculinity, like this is a man's cigarette. Smoke the cigarette and you are where you as a man belong. So it's supposed to appeal to the emotions that way. Now the interesting question there is, who is this ad appealing to? Who is the audience? Well, it must be men, right? Because women aren't going to look at this and say, oh, it's where a man belongs. Well, obviously, I should go out and buy it. So the message is very closely connected to who the audience is. So the audience here is men. The message is Camels will make you more cool and more masculine. And the way that it appeals to its sense of credibility is it gives you an image of a cool-looking masculine guy. And it appeals to the emotions basically in the same way, through image, saying like, doesn't this affect your feelings in any way? Now, the last appeal here, the one we've left till last, is logos. How does this ad appeal to your reason? Let me ask you this. What reason is there for smoking? Is there a good one? Basically, people smoke because they like it. They smoke because it makes them feel cool, or because they've always done it. People have all kinds of reasons for smoking. And so this makes the appeal to logos here is not as as simple as giving facts or evidence, but it does appeal to the reasons that people have for smoking. Remember, it doesn't have to be a good reason. It just has to be one that appeals to the audience. So if the audience says, well, I smoke because I like it, well, this guy seems to be having a pretty good time, right? So that gives you right there a reason to think that Camels are enjoyable. All right, so that's it for this ad for our intro to rhetoric. Excuse me, I'm still talking about ads. That's it for this video. But during this unit, you will basically be doing what I have just done in this video, where you will be analyzing an ad. The only difference is it is an ad that you actually create. So when you create your own ads, you need to think about these things regarding the rhetorical situation. Who is my audience? What is the message of my ad? How will we be using ethos, logos, and pathos to convince the audience of the message? All right, that's it for today, and please let me know if you have any questions.